Thank you all for joining securely on this brief overview of the impact the CARES Act can have on K-12 funding for this school year and definitely beyond. My name is Casey Agena, and I'll be providing a brief overview of the CARES Act and its impact on distance learning and funding for digital safety. Now, earlier this year, Congress and the Senate agreed to pass the CARES Act in response to COVID-19, economic uncertainty, and definitely what we're here to talk about, K-12 closures. Now, some may look at the CARES Act and feel like it is a little bit difficult to understand, but it really is 4 distinct buckets of money that would really impact K-12 budgets and the school year. So in regards to K-12 and distance learning models and reopening and distance learning, you really have to just kind of understand what these buckets of money are for, and we'll go through briefly on how these buckets of money can impact funding. So the first one is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, so ESSER. There's about $13.2 billion for K-12 education. The next bucket of money is $3 billion in the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, or GEER. While primarily going to higher education, there is some, ability or latitude for governors of states to send that money to K-12. But what we've seen over the past few months and through state legislation, that the money is a little bit directed towards higher education, four-year public and community colleges that support the state as well. Number 3 is the school model microgrants. Now, this microgrant is competitive grant. It really depends on how hard a particular state was impacted by COVID. So states apply for this and then get the money and then figure out how to use it. It's not for districts themselves. And the last piece is a $425 million towards the substance abuse and mental health services. We'll talk about this briefly a little bit later, but really as schools go back into session, real different models for supporting these particular students who need support in substance abuse and mental health services, as well as safety. And we'll touch upon this. Now, all of this money is allocated and earmarked in buckets, and it also needs to be spent or allocated to be spent by September 2022. And then, of course, there's an 18-month carryover for how that money is spent. And all of those pieces, again, it is dependent on the state. I mean, they really gave a latitude for states for how that money is dispersed to the districts, as well as a timeline and timetable for how that money is spent. Now, let's spend some time on the one bucket that is really impacting K-12. And that's the ESSER, ESSER or ESSER, depending on where you are on how you pronounce it. There are 3 real pieces that folks need to know about this particular money. Now, across the board, and I've looked at multiple states as well as how districts are applying to get the distribution of this money, which may already be allocated. The application across the board has been pretty easy, short, seamless. I mean, it was made to kind of cut the red tape and leave a very easy paper trail for one, how a district is going to use that money to support distance learning and infrastructure for distance learning, content, curriculum, PPEs for school, for reopening and that sort of thing. And but each state is different on how that works. There might be states that have a more inputs that are needed by a district to get the money, and some are just allocated. They just have to go into their state website and sign in. So it really varies. non-public schools can receive money as well. And again, this is depending on the state. I've worked with a few parochial schools already on their application in some states in the Southwest. So it really is dependent on the state. And the last piece is the deadline for both application as well as using the money. And these applications, repeat myself again, it's dependent on the state. So Ohio, as I have here, their application was due on May 10 for districts to apply to receive that allocation or distribution or disbursement. On the other side, there's a state like Arizona that again, they have to spend the money by 2022, but there's some wiggle room on when they have to spend that money by, depending on the state. So in Arizona, they have to spend it by December of this year, 2020, or have an allocation of procurement for programs or product to support distance learning and reopening. So really check on your state Department of Education on what that timeline is. That's a really important piece. Now, another thing that folks, I don't know if it's just scary to kind of dive into federal programs, but this is where I feel, and someone who has worked at both the state, county, and at the district level in Title III and Title IV, is something that I think that can have some great impact for districts. Waivers were included in the ESSER funding, and why this is important for title money or Title III, Title IV. We'll take Title IV, for example. There's a portion of Title IV money that can and should be used for digital learning and digital safety. We've seen a number of districts and states allowing or even pushing districts to use that money for solutions like an anonymous reporting solution or a technology management like a Chromebook or iOS device management for defined student groups. So there's some guidance that they've done in previous years. For this year, with the inclusion of ESSER, those caps on how much you can spend, as well as the monies that you've spent last year that you may carry over to this school year that you didn't spend based on the school closure or whatnot, they've kind of waived all of those caps and given some latitude for districts on that guidance. So an IT person working with the business office, working with your federal programs officer, is really important to see what those waivers are, how it can be used, and how it can impact a broader range of students as a district's reopening plans support distance or hybrid or some nuanced version of reopening. And now a big part of that also is the professional development. There are some parameters in terms of professional development for title money to be used, which most of the time kind of sat in Title II money for teacher training, but they've kind of waived that. They've kind of give some latitude for how teachers can understand a new product to support distance or digital school safety and school climate and student mental health. So be sure to check in with those folks on how that money is used. And the last piece of money, it's a smaller amount, but it's an important piece. And we've seen districts inquire about it. And this is a tough thing in terms of working with your MTSS or your multi-tiered systems of support, as well as your federal programs officer, to see how that money can be used to support defined student groups or particular students through distance learning and digital safety around mental health, SEL or social emotional learning, products, treatment, or support that can help students via remote learning. And of course, that racism, bullying, and school climate piece. So all those pieces fit in here. It seems like a smaller amount, but it can help in terms of that fiscal feasibility and sustainability for a district. Now, why is all of this important in terms of the CARES Act? Well, beyond the CARES Act, we know that because of the economic uncertainty and the environment that we're in, we're looking at probably topping out about 15 to 25% of school budgets really falling short this year. And many states have really allowed districts to kind of push their annual budget reports, which normally gets turned in the summer, into the fall, taking into consideration what the stimulus money, or like the CARES Act money, is going to do for the states as well as districts themselves. Now, why is this important? Because we really need to know how money is sourced to fund K-12 education. Because if you know that, and you know if what those pain points are, then you know how CARES Act money can help, quote unquote, backfill that money and be used in terms of procuring solutions, products, programs, and services that can support distance learning. And all states differ. And reduce state revenues, because there's not a lot of folks buying stuff and they're hunkered down at home, and local revenues from different tax sources are down, which are going to impact schools. And that's how school districts and LEAs are funded. And so we know that whether it's a property tax or sales tax, as we look at here in this particular chart, how much of that is impacting school budgets for these fiscal years kind of moving forward. So knowing that a particular school district in a particular state is going to be impacted, it's going to help in terms of where the pain points are for the district based on these particular data points, and how a partner can work together with a particular school district to address the pain point, as well as procuring that solution to support distance learning. So in terms of the districts, we know that there's in the short term, we know that hiring freezes are taking place. There's some promotions in terms of stipends for particular staff or faculty that are being held, just to be a little bit more conservative. And then, of course, looking ahead, we just shared with you some of the things that are going to impact not only this school year, but even the next, as districts are looking at some deficit spending or spending beyond what revenue may be coming in. So there's all of these pieces that are kind of lining up that are really impacting the procurement or a sales cycle, or how you can maintain that relationship between a provider, as well as making sure that the districts themselves are okay. And of course, the states themselves too. As we said, every state is really has its own latitude in terms of how the CARES Act can be garnered in terms of the application process, and then how stringent they are in terms of the reporting of that. So states themselves also are tackling these same problems in terms of the reopening, as well as what funding triggers are going to really help districts themselves. So we know that there's some sort of remote learning, distance learning, and hybrid models that districts have in place. We know that there's policies from the administrative as well as school board members that are enacting these policies, not only just for this school year, but even beyond. And there's some strategic pieces that are being laid out, not only for EdTech solutions, but of course, the students themselves, and what are the supports they need, sans being physically there. What are those student support and mental health pieces that they need even at home? So this is where we kind of come full circle on Securely itself. And this is where we're, as this pandemic that we're in, as school districts are looking at different models for reopening, I think that's where we are thinking internally on how we are aligned in terms of the solutions that we have that can be of great benefit, not only to the districts in terms of program and alignment, but really thinking about what we're talking about here, the fiscal impacts that districts may have. how that sets up in terms of their distance learning and digital school safety and the management. And of course, the broader group, the community as well. So all of those things really help to kind of align what we're doing at Securely with what's happening in the states, in the districts, and how the funding mechanisms are allowing districts to look at a company like Securely and see the solutions that we have that we're really aligned with where they want to go. So that's about it. It's a real quick, brief overview of the CARES Act, what is happening briefly about the economic landscape in terms of impact of schools, and then how solutions like Securely can support a digital environment moving forward beyond just this school year, and keeping the thought of our kids being safe, thoughtful, and real digital citizens when they have these devices and they're, like in this picture, not just at school, but even at home. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your week.